Welcome to the Insight Institute workshop, where we will be sharing some different programs, solutions for educational settings. And we'll be focusing on mindfulness-based social and emotional resiliency to support academic learning. And as we go through it, we're going to cover a few things, mostly focused on two things. One is awareness, the other is compassion, tenderness, and love. This quote comes from Tara Brach. If you're not familiar with her, she is a mindfulness leader throughout the world, actually. And this quote says, "We find true refuge whenever we recognize the silent space of awareness behind all our busy doing and striving. We find refuge whenever our hearts open with tenderness and love." So these two wings of awareness and compassion are going to be a theme as we go through these components of what Insight Institute can do for you, for your school, for your students, even for your community at large. So our agenda for the next 30-40 minutes together, we're going to go through who are we, and that's myself as well as you all, and then we'll prioritize you bringing in some experiential practice to go over some things that you can do for your own self-care, but also for your staff, your colleagues, your families, your friends, and sharing some of the classroom tools and resources that we have available for you, and even giving you some examples that you can take right back to your schools tomorrow. We'll end with some smiles and bring in some of the freebies and resources that we have available for you as well. And that intentional reflection, the what is your aspiration, what is it you're hoping for, can be such a vital part of what we do as we set mission statements or turn your compass to the direction that you want everything to be headed toward as you build your programs, build your scope, build your own practice even as a personal level. So let me share a little bit about who Insight Institute is. So my name is Carolyn Santangelo. I am retired from the classroom. I was in the classroom for over 34 years, working in many different capacities from elementary to middle school. And the last classroom experience I had was holistic horticulture, growing inside and out. So working with a Title I school, doing urban farming and embracing how to address some of the food deserts that we have, building an understanding of nature and an experiential part of that. Partnered every day with SEL and mindfulness. So we brought in some of those social emotional resiliency skills that would boost their academic learning as well. And from that position, launched into a role as a district leader, working for Broward County, Fort Lauderdale area, in the role as a SEL, social emotional learning, and mindfulness team lead right before the pandemic hit. So bringing mindfulness throughout the community and in many different ways, and addressing the social emotional needs of our students to build up that resiliency as we were going through so many challenges. And I can share some of the ways our district implemented those programs. We did 10 minutes of mindfulness a day. SEL was built in throughout their school plans, their school-wide improvement plans, so that they built in ways to address the needs of staff, the needs of the adults, so that they could set and help co-regulate with the students at that stage, and then bringing in programs for the students as well as parenting workshops, the leaders throughout the nation in mindfulness coming in to support us. And some of the programs that we also brought in were for trauma-informed programs. Broward County is where Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland is. So we've had our share of tragedies. I know that there are challenges throughout many, many schools and many, many districts. So those were some of my background pieces. But when you look at what mindfulness is for me, it's a deep personal practice, and it has supported me through some low-grade depression many years ago. Got involved in taking a mindfulness and compassion class, realized the impact, and wanted to go further to be trained on it so I could offer it to others, in particular students, but that also includes the staff so that they can provide that as well. So that's a little bit about Insight Institute. It provides programs across the gamut, and I'll go over what those are for you in a little bit. And so you can see and maybe find what works for you. And we also want to do some experiential so you can get a feel for what we do and how it internalizes for each of our participants or those that we're coaching or those that we're consulting with. So on this slide, prioritizing you, often they say take care of the adult first because they set that space, that container for safety for students, for the community, for learning and whatever role you're in. How do you prioritize you? Well, some of you checked in when we did the poll at the beginning, some of those self-care pieces. And mindfulness, here we are, educating mindfully is the core of this program, practicing that. So it's not something you can just say, well, I'm stressed, I need to do mindfulness. You have to build up that capacity, cultivating that skill the way an athlete or a musician would by practicing playing the violin or doing those basketball shots. So that muscle memory of sorts comes into play when you really need to tap into it, when you're triggered or upset or in a stressful situation. The aspiration check-in is revisiting our intentions like we did at the beginning. What were some of those things that brought you to this field? What inspires you as an educator most? What's the compass that keeps you heading straight to support yourself, to support your students or your staff? Then there's that pause. When working with students, using this as a pause button, let's hit that pause button. I get a sense that the class is really stressed before a test, or I noticed that you walked into the class, from the bus this morning, really wired and maybe triggered. Let's take a pause together, maybe breathe together. Do you want to check in with me? Do you want to go over and sit in the chill out zone? And we'll talk about some of those strategies. But ways to regulate ourselves. So these three top areas are so critically important because often we're in that reactivity mode where our habitual conditioning has caused us to lash out or get angry. And what we're looking for is that pause so that we can respond with ways that best supports us. Or as in the bottom row here, it talks about with our relationships with our students, our staff, relationships with ourselves, relationships with the curriculum that you might be teaching, the content areas, and where you can build in some of those resources to strengthen our understanding, our students' knowledge, the attitudes towards it. And then there's that opportunity to hit that reset button whenever we need and check in with ourselves to say, whoa, look where I'm at. So inviting any comments, if anybody wants to come off mute and share maybe how you do with some of these areas in these boxes, what's easy for you, maybe what's challenging for you. And what's challenging might even be the dogs barking in the background if you can hear them. So anybody want to type in chat as well? Maybe pick one of these. Which one is really at the top priority for you? Maybe it's practicing, or maybe it's your relationships, or maybe it's whatever your aspirations and intentions are. I can imagine it might be a combination. So some things that you can take home and take back to the classroom or take into your own toolbox of resources. These are some things that come from many sources. Perhaps you've seen the zones of regulation or circles. They have many different names. But if you look at this top area on the top left, to identify with students so they can help name it to tame it. So how are you feeling right now in math class even? Do you feel safe? Are you challenged, or are you overwhelmed and shutting down? To help them identify that, or help ourselves out when we're in a faculty meeting, can be so useful. And it's not that you shouldn't be in any one of these zones. but that you should be aware of where you are, because it happens in life. There are struggles and strife. But to know, well, I'm in the overwhelm zone right now. I need to go take a walk. Or we need to put on a little bit of music because the class is really stressed. And to help students and ourselves understand that this yellow area of challenge and growth can be really beneficial. That's often where learning takes place. But where do you want to be within that zone of yellow? Do you want to be closer to the safety area, or do you want to be closer to the overwhelmed area? It depends on your capacity for resilience, for your ability to engage and find what your limits are. For example, an athlete who's professional might be towards the yellow zone. I'm really going to push myself and do these reps and lift the weights a little bit heavier each time. But a student who's just learning maybe the math concepts and equations that might be overwhelming for them might only need to be in that 20% stretch, closer to the safety zone. But to give the students that language and that frame of reference can be so very helpful. There's so many other resources out there for this kind of a diagram, but to bring in our awareness, how are you today? If you do a check-in as students walk through the door, maybe even having this diagram or poster as they walk in the door to say, all right, where are you today? And they just tap it and it gives you a temperature check of where your class is. Hey, you guys aren't feeling safe with this lesson. Let me review it. Let's go back over it a little bit more and talk about some of these vocabulary, these concepts. But it's also useful with the mindful part of how you are emotionally, socially, and maybe with your relationships with, again, content, but also with the people that are in your life. The middle one here at the top, focus fun. Many different tools out there for mindfulness where you bring in your attention. I know as a certified trainer for mindfulness-based stress reduction and also trained with the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, working towards training and certification with Tara Brock and Jack Cornfield. There are many different types of focus, meditations, and mindfulness practices. It could be finding a way to focus on sounds. What this does is it gets you out of that triggered or overwhelmed state, brings you back to the present moment. So we're not in that up and down of fight or flight, but we're bringing us down into that place of rest and digest, or that opportunity to find the pause button so our body and our mind can come back to that balanced state of homeostasis. Movement is another way to do a little bit of a stand and stretch, or invite in some music and dancing, shaking. There's all kinds of research-based programs that bring in the focus and the fun, that even research shows just bringing in a 2 or 3 minute practice. And I'll give you some examples and links for that. On the top right, STOP, a great way to help students and staff remember that pause button. So the S is often stop. Sometimes it's close your eyes, but that's not a safe feeling for everyone. So you can bring that in as invitational. Then it's T for take a few breaths. O is observe what's going on and proceed with what best supports you. My students created videos for this that they then broadcast throughout the morning news at the school to help others find those tools in their toolkit that they already have, but it's a way to remind ourselves like, whoa, I'm starting to get triggered, or somebody pushed me in the lunch line. What can I do? Let me take a few breaths. Let me observe what's going on. Oh, the person behind them pushed them and that bumped into me. And then decide, proceed with what's best supporting you. Now, this befriend the breath. Befriending the breath is often a tool used in mindfulness because the breath is always with us. It's always connecting us to the present moment. Jon Kabat-Zinn has this quote that I just love. It says, if you're breathing, there's more right with you than wrong with you. Because oftentimes our negativity bias gets us locked into all the things that are going on that are stressful or causing tension or the conflict or things that are overwhelming. But if we can also rest ourselves on the positive, the rainbows, not just the raindrops, we can find ways to bring about that opportunity to focus on the present moment and bring us back to balance. Let's see if I can get this video going. There's lots of different practices for students. This one in particular, I think it's University of Alabama, is square breathing. And it brings a focus where there's a count of 4. And students might find this pace works great, or they might need to do it slower or faster. But it's inhale, hold, exhale, hold. Let's do a few breaths right now. So inhale, hold, exhale, hold. And inviting you on this next breath cycle to see where you can soften any parts of tension in your body. Maybe it's your mind. Maybe your mind is very active. Maybe it's your body that you can drop your shoulders a little bit. And that is just one resource for one type of breath. There's some appropriate skills like the blowing out the candle or inhaling a flower that brings it to a more concrete level depending on the age of student, although I like to do that one too. Now, this is a very cool one here on the right side, is bringing it to hands-on, the active engagement. You may be familiar with calming jars or glitter jars like a snow globe, where if you use that as an analogy for all the things that are going on in the life of your faculty, perhaps you're shaking it up and you've got the emails, the papers to grade, you've got all of the accountability pieces, you got the parent phone calls they have to do, and you got students knocking at your door because they're hungry and they want to get a granola bar from you. All those things aren't going to go away. But if we give ourselves that moment to moment opportunity to calm down, maybe it's just research says 6 to 9 breaths can help us shift our regulation from that zone of overwhelmed or challenged into a safer zone. My students made these out of water bottles and just simple water and glitter and gave them to every teacher so that they had them on their desk to give to students, or they put it in their chill out zone or their Zen corner, whatever they might have. Journaling is another way to bring in that hands-on opportunity so students can reflect. They can write about, let's go with those zones of regulation. How were you today? Can you find a time when you felt safe, a time when you were challenged? Maybe you have an overwhelmed anecdote that you want to share. And having some of the posters of mindfulness concepts, growth mindset, and we can provide some of those with you as well. I mentioned the chill out zone, and I don't know if you can raise hands if you have any area in your classroom that might be that safe zone. There's many different strategies for this. One comes from conscious discipline, where you have the safe zone where students can go and help themselves regulate. And you might have some tools there to help them self-regulate. Might be crayons or paper to scribble or write. Might be one of these glitter jars or calming jars. Might be something for them to read, or affirmations, or a poem that might help them find ways to regulate themselves. I have found that to be such a value in the particular classroom and school that I was at. Many times the students haven't been modeled those resources for themselves, how to regulate, how to calm down. Every day, every classroom, I had a student say, can I go sit over in the chill out zone? They named it, they decorated it, they gave some input. And watching a middle school student, toughest dude in the classroom, sit in that corner of the classroom with a little comfy chair, and there was a teddy bear there, and no one else could see, but man, he was hugging that teddy bear, holding it tight. Unknown what was going on with him. He couldn't always process it in words, but this gave him comfort. Little timer set. He could stay another minute if he needed it, and he came back in and was definitely more comfortable and more of an added value to the classroom as far as being able to engage in learning. Classroom jobs, another great way to bring about that opportunity for mindfulness and social emotional learning. So this Insight Institute framework is built around mindfulness-based, social and emotional resiliency to support academic learning. So some of the classroom jobs that you invite in, and I've seen schools do it as well with their faculty, that the faculty have jobs as well. For example, a cheerleader, somebody who would have permission to holler out in class, "That's a great idea, good job." Or if somebody picked up a piece of trash that didn't make it in the trash can, they had that permission to reinforce positively and recognize some of the efforts that were going on. We also had mindfulness leaders where after it was modeled and a comfortable repertoire for our classroom, that the students would start to lead some of the mindfulness, doing the square breath that was on that video that we saw. So I wanted to just share, there are lots of tools. This is a video out there that has the image, the analogy of a calming bottle or a glitter jar. And it brings in some sound as well. That's another way to bring in some of the sensitivities and the senses into this. Mindful eating is another way to engage. And bringing about mindful eating as an example that, all right, here's a new food. Maybe you've never tried this before, and you might like it or not like it. That's part of some of the feeling tones, the overall categories. But then let that go, and then let's notice the qualities coming into the present moment. Is it sweet or salty? Is it crunchy? Is it juicy? Is it something that you can hear a sound when you eat? So that's just another way to bring in some of the hands-on opportunities. And I would love... Alrighty, so if we move on, some of the resources that Insight Institute has, if you'd like to scan, if you have your phone handy. Otherwise, I have your emails and I'll send out some of the resources and other things that you might need. But the Insight Institute website has so many different menu items on there. One is we do mindfulness-based stress reduction. We do mind-body skills groups. We do offer things for teens and adults, community members, parents, and there are recordings of some of the practices that are research-based, and you can use those for yourself or listen to those in meetings, share them in your classrooms. The programs that we offer, I'm going to pull up a slide next for some of those so you can see what our general categories are, and we can then individualize it for whatever you need in your community. And having done that with a large-scale district, sixth largest district in the country, 240,000 students, 30,000 staff, ranging from doing trainings for non-instructional, for bus drivers, cafeteria workers, to bring in some of those mindfulness-based social emotional resiliency pieces can be so valuable for that feel of community, of family in your school. There's also some research on mindfulness and how it can impact the focusing ability, the empathy development, and many other things that keep coming out in research about how mindfulness can support all of us. And then there's the bio, so you can see the trainings, the certification from University of California, San Diego, some of the other programs in the history that we've offered. So you get a sampling of what we might be able to do for you, your district, your school, your classrooms. So here's the offering. So if you look across the top, that might be some of the roles that you are in or the hats that you're wearing. And we can do virtual trainings, coachings, consultations. And we can also come to you in person and work out what's needed, meet with your staff members. So I know in developing our scope and sequence for Broward County, and also in consulting out of state in Georgia with other school systems, we've worked on ways to build that plan, starting from what's your mission, what's your vision, and then what are the needs, who are the stakeholders that you want to be working with, how does this support academic learning, and then flipping it into whatever your district's plans are or your school improvement plans. And working through either consultation with small groups, having worked with some of the programs for students in special education, or working even with the academic department, and how do you bring SEL into some of the lessons, the summer school programs, the academic after school care programs, and just even what's needed for the leaders, district leaders, to have a feel for what this is so they can embody it, share it, model it. And you'll see the list for staff and educators if it's a faculty meeting, burnout prevention, if there are planning days to come in and do a 1 day or a 2 day trainings, a couple hours on each day, or rotating throughout the day depending on the teacher's planning time and how you work in the educational continuing learning. And doing things with parenting workshops can be so valuable if you have an innovation zone, if your PTA has an organization at the district level or even at the school level, going in and talking about how the parenting skills can really be strengthened by the social emotional skills, this mindfulness-based, research-based program that's presented in a way that makes it accessible for all. Accessible meaning it's secular, non-religious, it's research-based. There are components which are enhancing of health standards, talking about social skills, talking about intrapersonal skills. If you're familiar with the Castle Wheel, addressing all of those and more. Then there's directly for students, coming in and doing assemblies, working with programs to support peer counselors. If you have the student leadership development, student council, done all of those, even using student leaders to provide resources for the district, where it's the student-led initiatives, student leaders presenting the programs. And if a particular school has had some trauma impact, to come in and offer some of that healing that's trauma sensitive and informed and research based. So the in-person is there. We can come to you. We can do it virtually. And really the idea is to make it personalized, because that's when we bring in those two wings of awareness and kindness, compassion. Those two pieces are really what can support our students, our staff, our communities, our world, bringing it forward in such a kind, attentive way. So with that, I offered some smiles. I don't know if you're familiar with the story of Sisyphus. Sisyphus is the one rolling the boulder up the hill. And that may be what educators feel often, especially if there's not enough resources of time, of materials, of support, of leadership sometimes. So what do we do with that? Because that may be the reality of the level of stress we have. How do we manage it? Well, on the right side, there's Sisyphus taking a break, propping up that boulder and having it looks like a sandwich. And maybe it's a jug of wine. No, maybe it's a jug of water. There we have it. But taking that opportunity so we can reset, regulate ourselves and give ourselves that downtime so we can find that balance and not be stuck in that chronic stress, not be stuck in that reactivity, that habitual conditioning of all the strife and the struggles, which will be there. We're not going to have that go away, but to be able to give our mind and our body that opportunity to reset and drop on back into that calm state so we can see things with more clarity. We can come from a place of heart and head and not just the patterns of our thinking that may have been unhealthy responses, to find an opportunity for what serves us best. There's a few comics that just have made me smile. Maybe you'll find that brings in there. So the comic on the left, if you can't read it, says, I don't know if it's burnout, but I set off the smoke alarm 6 times today. I've had days like that in the classroom. And one of the tools I used was, as the bell rang, I would walk outside with the students, maybe talking with one or two, or maybe in silence, go a few steps, turn around, and then that time when I'm walking back to the classroom is when I took a few breaths for myself. I noticed my stress level. I hit my pause button so that when that next classroom came in, I was able to be as present as I could for them. The middle one, I couldn't help it. As a previous science teacher, I just had to add this in there to find a place where we can bring in humor for ourselves. And I can only imagine what happened when the teacher let go of that student on the swing. Then there's some advice. One of my heroes, Mr. Fred Rogers, talks about the 3 ways to ultimate success. First way is to be kind. The second way is to be kind. And the third way is to be kind. We often don't know our students' stories when they walk through that door, the skills they may have been exposed to or may have never seen, and what their situations are. Maybe they're hungry, maybe they're abused, maybe there's something going on right before they walked in on the bus. and to be kind in understanding where everyone could be coming from, inviting in that awareness and that kindness. So with that, here's some kindness for you. Raffles and freebies. You can take out your phone if you'd like to and use the QR codes. There's a raffle, but also a discount. It's offered on a sliding scale. It's kind of who we are at Insight Institute. We want to make it accessible. We know the situations are not always what they are for others. And we also know educators are working really hard. So there's a sliding scale for a mind-body wellness program. This is based on the Center for Mind-Body Medicine with Dr. James Gordon, research-based. And you're welcome to join us. It's online for an hour and a half for 6 Mondays. And it gives you an opportunity to build community, build resources in your toolbox. On the right side, a little bit of late notice, but there's an all-day mindfulness retreat. Again, it's free. You're welcome to make donation, but this is what we do. And it goes through some of the mindfulness-based stress reduction strategies for a full day. You can find out more by clicking on the QR code or reach out to me and I'll give you more information. So with that, let's take, we've got a minute here. These are some ease practices, finding some joyful reflection. Maybe imagining your safe place is something you can do with your students, as well as talking to a supportive guide and using imagery. There's a sense of smiling from the inside out, to even just bring that to the eyes, maybe not to the face, and explore what that feels like. Butterfly hug, if you've never done it, it's locking the thumbs together and bringing the palms to the chest and feeling that little pat, pat, pat on there. And there's research on these practices and how they support and get the hormones flowing that help us find a sense of ease. Reflecting on gratitude and what's been appreciated in our lives, or who has been appreciated in our lives. Even finding that one student, this helped me a lot. Finding that one student who was really interested, and that's who I was teaching. Often days when the rest of the students might have been struggling with focus or distractions, let me bring in this as well. And then the last thing, I'm going to invite you to type in chat 1 or 2 words expressing what is needed for education, from education for our students and for the world. So maybe it's peace, maybe it's ease, maybe it's healing, maybe it's empathy. You can type in those words as well. And as we wrap up, would love to hear from you if you have any success stories in your classrooms, in your schools, or your communities, or questions you might have about what Insight Institute offers, and any ideas that you want to share. You can email, reach out, call me, check out the website, come off and mute and come on camera to at least say hello. And if there's anything you want to share, we're grateful that you showed up, and Insight Institute is here to support you in whatever way we can.